Hello, Niner faithful, and welcome to the Johnny Dale Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game. We do that by talking through and dissecting game film and diving deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino with a hoarse voice as I was at the game last last afternoon, reminding you as always the most fun way to watch is live on YouTube where we are always live. There you can comment in the live show. Be sure to hit the notification bell. We also stream live on Facebook and Twitter or X. Also, the audio versions are found always right afterwards on Spotify, Apple, the usual suspects. You're inside the Johnny Dale Football Academy. Well, welcome into a victory Monday for the New York Jets. That's how I'll start the show, saying that the Eagles feel our demise as well. So I'll start on that positive. We have a lot to get into. I will say from the get go to hit the hashtag JD49. If you are watching live on YouTube, Facebook, or X, we appreciate boosting the algorithm for all Niner fans. We obviously have a lot to talk to. I promise you, we will not leave any stone unturned. We will get into everything. Excuse my voice as I was screaming in Cleveland yesterday at all of the calls that we will get into again. Johnny is coming looking a little pale background. How are you feeling about everything this morning?
Feeling all right. Yes, I am in a different location than normal. I'm not in my office. I'm in my wife's office at our house because my wife had an appointment in another town that she's had for 2 months. And so she took my son with her. My oldest daughter is at school in first grade, and my middle daughter's on the other side of this wall watching Spider-Man because every one of her teachers at her daycare tested positive for the vid. So you may see Middle Dell come in the middle of the show. We'll see. We'll see what
Little
happens. I don't
Dell.
know. We'll see how well she does with Spider-Man on the other side. She's watching Spidey and Friends on Disney Plus. But yeah, so it does look a little bit different. Sounds a little bit different. I don't have all my normal stuff. But other than that, doing okay. It's been a little bit of a rough weekend with the game, kind of being the last kicker on that. Now, I do want to take a minute and address the Jack Hammer, Jeff Patterson situation. Okay. Many of you who are on Twitter or X have seen this go around over this weekend. It's something that really caught me off guard, and I wanted to address it because he has been somebody that's been on the show, and I have been on his show. I will tell you that will not be happening from this point forward. I didn't want to do a big post about it on Twitter. That's just not how I work. So it was a situation. If you don't know what's happened, I'll just tell you. You can look for it on Twitter. It's pretty readily available there
Yeah, not
of
hard to
of
find.
everything in that situation. But we've talked when you first reached out to me, Adam. One of your first questions was, what are your goals with this channel, and what do you want to do with this? And I was very upfront. I said, I'm not looking to do this full time. I love what I do, and I have a job outside of this, and I love that job. And a lot of what that entails is working with teenagers. That's pretty much 90% of my job, and I've done that for almost 15 years now. And I work with a lot of teenagers that are from broken homes, that are from bad situations. And so what happened with the background with who we now know is Jeff Patterson, I don't have a lot of sympathy for. And it's something that speaks very, very close to me, with young people that I've known, with people in my family. And so all ties there are being severed. And with Jack or Jeff, however we're going to call him, and I have deleted the only episode that was on my channel that had him on there. This is something that uh, hits me at a visceral level, and so that is not a working relationship that will be happening at all from this point forward. Just wanted to let everybody know about that, and where we stand as a channel on that.
Yeah, for sure. It's not something that we take lightly. I also used to do a lot of the same stuff that Johnny does in working with kids, and I've worked in the school system and coached basketball and volleyball, and have been around teenagers for about 20 years. And definitely, it just had that ick kind of feeling when you see it and you feel duped, or you feel like something was take like a certain feeling is just like brought on you. And so yeah, I appreciate everything that you do for your community there in Alabama, and the kids that you're around, and that you have a positive experience with and do things the right way. We appreciate as the Niner faithful. So definitely appreciate you saying that. I wanted to jump into my experience a little bit yesterday, just because it was my first game this year. And so I live in the smack dab middle of the following cities, which is pretty cool: Detroit, Chicago, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and Cleveland. And I say smack dab in the middle, I'm 3 hours or less from every single one of those cities, which is pretty cool when the Niners are around. And so I made the trip with my friend Adrian, big Niner fan. Shout out to Adrian. And so we go, and there wasn't a normal rush. The tailgate, John Chapman wasn't able, that was one of the games he wasn't able to go to. However, there's a group out of Toledo that, when I say faithful, my gosh, guys, it was amazing. There was a sea of red in the parking lot that was 2 blocks from Cleveland. And in the chat, if you were there, um, hit um hashtag Toledo. Hashtag Toledo if you know what I'm talking about, because it was insane. They did giveaways. They had John Taylor's jersey autographed, and they had a lot of giveaways. They raised money for charity. It was free will donation, and there was tons of food. I had more hot dogs than I would care to admit, and more Mountain Dew to keep me going than I would care to admit as well. Um, it was just amazing. The spirits were high. There was not many Cleveland people around, and when they were around, they kind of were just like, "Well, take it easy on us," and we'll get into the game later as well. But that experience was really really cool to just be around so many. And I was so upset after the game that I didn't upload this the way I wanted to, and I didn't even tell you, Johnny, because I was upset. But I want to give a shout out to um a couple people, and here's why. I was walking around and just doing my thing, and someone came up to me, and Thomas and Rose from Belgium, they came up to me and said, "Are you Adam Marino?" And I thought, with an accent, and I thought, uh, I mean, they look safe. It was a safe place, a sea of red. I was like, "Yes." And they said, "We recognize you from the podcast." And I just, oh my gosh, was so cool to show people the channel and be like, "Yeah, I know that channel." Or a lot of people say, "Oh, I didn't know." And like, so cool. So shout out to Thomas and Rose. Rose was wearing a 49ers hat that was given to Thomas when he was about 12 years old. His father swapped hats with the guy at a rugby match. And then one day when he was bored, he decided to look up the 49ers and saw that they were playing the Green Bay Packers, and Colin Kaepernick, as we know, went off that game. And ever since, he's been forever faithful. He made the trek from Belgium, How cool is that? I met so many people from all around Toronto, Canada. Big shout out. Tons of Niner fans in Toronto. It's just been so cool to see the faithful live in this chat and then live in person, everyone showing love, giving hugs. And then we do the march at 12 noon local time to get in the to get in line to go, and we're just shouting like Niners, and it was just awesome. And no, I will not be in Minnesota. RTP FTW. I won't have a chance to get to Minnesota, but it was just awesome. And then the game, and we just start like everything else, right? We just go down, pound the ball in there, a couple penalties help out, and penalties will be a big thing of what we talk about. I don't even know where to start. The first drive, I guess, yep, was great. What do you say about that? We've seen that a million times this year. There's not much to say about the first drive other than been there, done that. Where do you think, though, the turning point where it was for you, Johnny, in that all of a sudden, okay, it's 7-0 in the first 5 minutes. That's all well and good because we're used to it. But at what point in the game was the first time you said, okay, this is not the way that we have experienced, this season yet?
Oh boy. I think it was probably about halfway through the second quarter is that you were expecting, that first drive went so well. And then as the game goes, it just felt like where before everything on offense seemed so easy and everything on offense just seemed like you were just maybe when you didn't score, it was a thing here or a thing there. This felt like the team was for the first time truly experiencing difficulty in moving down the field. And some of that was Jim Schwartz and that defense. So give big credit to Cleveland. And we talked with Quincy Carrier, who is a very knowledgeable Browns content creator. And one thing that we had talked about, and I think I said this on the podcast, it was either on here or with his, I can't remember because we did them back to back.
Sure.
But was that this was a game that could turn into what you don't want if you're a 49ers, which was you're in the middle of the third quarter and a team you should have put away, and a team that when you had your chance to distance yourself from them, you didn't. And suddenly they're hanging around in the middle of the third quarter and you're in a dogfight. And suddenly anything can go wrong for you. One little thing goes wrong, and this goes from a game that you should have won to a game that you are now staring back at a loss. And that's exactly what happened in this game. And I think I think it was in seeing just how the offense, I think it was the play where Purdy went back to pass and the ball slipped out of his hands as he was going to throw. It just came out and he fell on it, but it was one of those moments of you just kind of went, oh boy.
Yeah, here we go.
Because everything on offense looks so difficult. And it was just a game that the weather was not in your favor at times. The wind was not in your favor at times.
Yeah.
What could have gone wrong at the wrong times did, and the team was constantly behind schedule. Constantly, every first down seemed like it was a negative play in some way.
Yeah.
It was either
Battle.
no gain, or it was a penalty, or it was a sack, or it was an incompletion. First downs were horrible in this game. And so I think it was middle through the second quarter when you started feeling like this was a game that a team that could not get on schedule. And we've seen this 49ers team when Shanahan's offense is so much about setting one thing, setting up another thing, and everything working in sequence. And people will say, well, that's a bad scheme if it can't work when it's not in sequence. It's not necessarily that it's a bad scheme because it can't work when it's not in sequence. You have contingencies, but you only have so many contingencies. You have your A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and there's only so many drives in the game. Well, there's certain things that when you cannot get any of these intros going, you can't segue into anything else. And that's what it felt like through the whole game, that the team could never segue into part B. Part A was constant. Every time they turned to this part A or that part A, the intro to something that was going to be more, that was getting defeated. And it was either by a block, a drop pass, a bad throw, poor blocking, whatever it was that it was consistently off kilter. And again, give credit to Cleveland's defense. That is one of the best defenses in the league. I think when you're looking at the top, Dallas likes to believe that they have a top defense in the league. I think when you look at the best 3 defenses in the league, you're talking about the Jets, you're talking about the Browns, and you're talking about the 49ers. Those 3D and kudos to the Browns and the Jets. I mean, I think I've wanted to believe that the 49ers might have the best defense in the league, but I don't think they do. When you start looking at what the Jets and the Browns have done without hardly any offensive support.
Right.
Okay, we've kept teams to really good point totals on the year with a lot of offensive output, and we've controlled the ball. What the Browns and the Jets have done is do this with very little production and turnovers from the quarterbacks. And, that's really impressive. When you watch what the Jets have been doing, that defense is hungry and legit. And I just think back to their win over the Bills, that they took on one of the most explosive offenses in the league, and the defense won that game. I mean, you had this team that's coming out. They're supposed to be all riding on Aaron Rodgers, the big acquisition, who was going to take them from being a mediocre offense to a really good offense. And they have a really world-class defense. And suddenly they lose Aaron Rodgers, and they're back to Zach Wilson, who looks about as terrible as he did before. And they won that game. They forced 3 picks by Josh Allen. They get 4 turnovers. Like they won that game with their defense. And this felt like a game that the defense was going to have to win. And because of what the offense was going through, with Trent Williams being hemmed up, with the loss of Christian McCaffrey, with the loss of Deebo Samuel. And then it just seemed like, and Kyle admitted this in the press conference afterwards, that they were not well prepared enough for the loss of both of those guys in the game. That once they lost both of those guys, it was, and no, I do mean Josh Allen. There's a comment of, do you mean Jalen Hurts and not Josh Allen? No, I'm talking about the very first game of the year. And what the Jets did against Jalen Hurts yesterday was really impressive too. But the opening game, was it Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football?
When Aaron
Rodgers tore his ACL, they beat the Bills. And the fact that defense with the Jets has been able to do that, kudos to them. And the Browns feels very much like that defense. And I think Robert Saleh and Jim Schwartz are 2 of the best defensive minds we have in the game. I would put D'Amico in that same kind of category with what he was able to do with the 49ers the last couple of years. And, so this is a little bit different. I feel like Steve Wilkes is still trying to figure out how to run this defense. I think we've been a little soft against the run, and we shouldn't be. And that was something that with Robert Saleh and D'Amico Ryans was the number one thing. Steve Wilkes, coming from a defensive back and a secondary background, I'm not sure if I'm thinking he's thinking coverage more than some of the things that having to do with the run. And it seems like we have not been as stout against the run as we have in the past. And that was one thing that in this game you couldn't allow. This needed to be a game where they needed to have keep them to 1 and 2 yard runs. Like that's what the defense needed to have. And they did at times, but when you started giving Cleveland those 3, 4, 5 yard runs, that's when you were letting them, with PJ Walker, stay on schedule, keep the ball in their hands. I mean, they had some long drives, the Browns did. And, your offense is out of rhythm. The weather is not on your side. And there's penalties everywhere. And look, we like to talk about how San Francisco, the refs were coming at San Francisco. Well, Cleveland was flagged for more penalties. Now, I will say that the flag at the end of the game on Tayshaun Gibson, I don't know, Adam, if you've seen the replay of that since you were at the game.
No, I have.
That was one of the worst calls at the worst times, because you're talking that's the difference in the game. And, you're looking at, you had a moment of it's third and 10, and all of a sudden, man, it gives them a first down, and they go down, they kick what ends up being the game-winning field goal. You worry about Jake Moody, a 41-yarder. I question Kyle's decision. I remember sitting there watching the game and thinking, why aren't we going a no huddle and running the ball, man? Like, run the ball here. There was like 26 seconds left. You get your rookie kicker a little bit closer. Yeah, it might be 2 yards, it might be 3 yards, but sitting
Right.
there watching them and then spike the ball, I was like, what? Why didn't you had time to run another play? I get you don't want to have a negative there. I get you don't want to risk a fumble or anything, but it's your kicker had missed one earlier in the game. It's a 41-yarder. Like, make it a 38-yarder, make it an extra point. Make it something that's routine for him. Yeah, he needs to make that kick, but it was just it felt like a game that the entire team was so out of sorts all game.
Yeah, it was just the perfect storm of a bad day, things adding up. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to address from my side the penalties because, again, I was in the stadium and I was in that. And I first want to say thank you for the super chat. On my end, I have absolutely zero concerns. Thanks to RG Teamster. He asked, any concerns about Purdy's wet ball grip? He's not a robot. He's not perfect. Any concerns to me? No. What about you?
I think one, I can understand why there would be grounds for concern. When you go back to how he started the game against Seattle last year in the playoffs, it was a wet game, wet ball, and a ball sailed on him. Now, as that game went and he got more comfortable with it, Purdy put up, did great. It was like through 3 touchdowns, 330 yards, something like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mistakes
what was
happen.
what was going on? Yeah, what was going on in Cleveland? Obviously some balls got away from him. I mean, the pick, that was a ball that you could see did not come out of his hand right. There was the fumble that happened because of the wet ball. I have a feeling, knowing who Purdy is, and seeing the kind of guy he is, I'd imagine that this week he's going to spend a lot of time with some footballs dunked in a water bowl and throwing them. That just seems like the kind of guy he is. When you look at Tom Brady very early on in his career, who wasn't a great wet ball thrower. You can go back to the tuck rule, right? That was in a snow game. The ball got out of his hand. Now, as his career went on, you could tell that Tom worked on that and became one of the best wet ball throwers that I think we've ever seen in the game. And some of that too, Tom later did end up using a glove. Maybe that's something that Purdy works with in those situations.
Good point.
That's something that if you haven't thrown with a glove, that can really throw a guy off of how much grip they're getting on the ball. But I see it as something he's probably going to attack, and I would hope that he would attack in this. It was a game that again, even with everything that went wrong, look, Tom Brady, his first Super Bowl, we forget sometimes that was a 20-17 win over the Rams, and he had one of the best defenses in the league, and he ended up going down. It's tied 17-17 in that game, and put his team in a position where Adam Vinatieri hit a 48-yard field goal to win their first Super Bowl. And it wasn't a great statistical performance from Tom Brady in that Super Bowl, but he won because he put his team in a position to win at the end for a 48-yard field goal. In the end, yeah, Brock Purdy had a rough game, but he put the team in a position to win. I mean, it was closer than Tom got in that Super Bowl. Just the kicker didn't make it. And so, unfortunately, it is what it is. But I don't have any concerns with Purdy with the wet ball right now.
Right. Another super chat. Thank you to Cornelius. He asks about what did you think about that fumble? We'll get more into that. I did think that it was a fumble. You can see the replay
It was a
of
fumble. It was a
his
fumble.
arm, and it just was. And we'll get
The dude was not throwing it.
chronologically.
He was losing grip on it, and he was trying to grab it, is what he was trying to do. He was trying to grab what he was losing grip on. It wasn't a throw. He wasn't even trying to throw that ball.
We'll hopefully Charles Woodson is not listening, because I mean, I'm sure it brings back bad memories. It's a similar idea of that. So
it's the underhand tuck rule.
right, which Purdy kind of did later, but anyway, so which was called a sack. So I want to explain a little bit about my thoughts on the refs, because in this game it mattered, as there was 25 yellow flags thrown on the field. And so the very first time that there was a shift and like this weird haze over the stadium was when on a punt return, they said face mask number 20 on Cleveland. And they showed the replay, and it was so blatantly missed that the stadium, it was weird, guys. It was like there was going to be a riot, like that people could not believe it. Even when the refs go back and change it and make it right, my point is this: it didn't matter. The it the mist, the pissed mist had settled around the entire city of Cleveland at that point. And it was this weird vibe that no matter what flag was thrown, that it was going to be a, are you sure? Or you probably missed that. It just was. It was palpable. If you weren't there, you just don't know. And it was very odd. I've been to NFL games before, never seen anything like it. Again, even when they corrected it, which I don't know what that looked like on TV, but it was maybe not as big a deal. They're like, oh, no, that's not right. And then they just fix it. But then they showed, here's what Cleveland did, which I will say is brilliant. Every time it was a blatant either face mask or hold on us, and I will say our ball carriers face masked multiple times, guys. I hate to admit that, but it was multiple. They would show it on the big screen for the entire state of Ohio. And the fans were just giving it to him. And I would even look around and I was like, ooh, like that's a bad look because that takes away our first down or field position or whatever we were doing. So the only reason I bring this up, guys, I'm not a Cleveland fan. I'm not, you know this. However, I can't overall be upset, and I'm not the refs blew it kind of guy either, because there was a lot of calls missed that could have gone against us and did not. And when I look at that play that you mentioned against Gibson, I hate to say that I understand where it's coming from, but I will say if that ball was placed better, he wouldn't have been exposed, and that was a key factor. But again, those calls were very bad on both ends because we're in Cleveland, and they showed on the video board all these times where so and so is pulling this guy or whatever. At the end of the day, I can't be too upset because we are objective. Shout out to RTP, FTW, man. Like, I'm just keeping it real, guys. Like, there was a lot of missed calls that would have went against us, and it would have been fair, and they didn't. And so, again, thank you
Yeah.
to Glass City Super Chat here. Says, you think the Rundy issues is scheme, not personnel or a talent issue, especially with the second string. It's obvious that opposing D is headhunting CMC. It's a pattern now. And yeah, we'll get into the injuries maybe next. So thank you, Glass City. Always a fan of the show, so we appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean, with the refs thing, it's one of those. Yeah, there was that bad call on Tayshaun Gibson, but they missed calls on, like you said, on 49ers ball carriers, on face masks that weren't thrown. Both teams got away with some calls. Both teams were on the receiving end of some bad calls. This was a really sloppy game, and that's what you kind of expect in a game that was going to be such a fight. That Kyle Shanahan had described as being a really grimy game, a tough it out game, because you're talking about two defenses that are so physical. That was one thing that we talked about with Quincy, right? Was that the difference between this defense and Dallas's defense was that this defense was physical. Dallas's defense was not physical, and they got bullied out of the stadium. Cleveland's defense was going to come in, and we knew they were going to be physical. And when you have two really physical teams, there's the skirmish and fight before the game. That tends to be a game where there will be a lot of penalties because guys are grabbing, guys are fighting, guys are pulling tooth and nail to get whatever they can. And it's about which team keeps their composure in those moments and doesn't commit all those different penalties. I love the hit that Tayshaun Gibson had, but you can't, at the same point, while we can say it's a bad flag, you also can't light that guy up, period, in that situation. The guy was short of the first down anyways. deep in Cleveland territory. I know it's a bang bang play. It's happening. You can't necessarily judge that he's short of the first down, but it's one of those that while you love to make a big play there, you can't give up that kind of a penalty. You can't even put that kind of moment in the hands of the ref. And so, it was like a lot of the players said after the game, we didn't deserve to win this game. And that really is what it felt like in a lot of ways. So do I think the run D issue is scheme? I think there's a little bit there. I think there's a little bit of we're not seeing of the sometimes what I'm seeing is that Steve Wilkes is running a lot more line slants than D'Amico did and that Robert Saleh did at different times. And so what's happening is there's moments where you're getting a defensive tackle running on a slant and he ends up getting thrown out of the hole because he's already moving that direction. And so it opens up a little bit of a hole there. You have guys trying to loop around. And what's really, keeping this defense from probably giving up an extra 30 or 40 yards a game on the run is the stellar play of our linebackers. But it's like they're up front with the defensive tackles. There's not as much hit, read, and then go and play the quarterback play the run on the way to the quarterback. This feels like a little bit more like we're trying to generate some pressure on early downs and create some negatives early. And I'm seeing us give up a little more yards than we normally would. I think one thing that has helped our run defense look better through the first 5 weeks has been the incredible play by the offense. And so teams are playing catch up, and so they're not running the ball as much as they have been. So in a game like this, where you had to have the defense take over and completely stuff the run and completely put the game in the hands of PJ Walker, that's what you needed in this game. You needed it for the last 2 possessions that the Browns were going to have, is that PJ Walker had to make some big time throws. And we saw on that last drive that they were getting to him. He couldn't make those big time throws. It was not happening. And we ended up letting them get back in the game. You got the penalty, and then you let them get a 4 or 5 yard run. They stay on schedule and they get into field goal range. And that's what you couldn't let happen. The headhunting CMC, I think that's been happening to him his whole career. He's one of those dynamic players. Look, this is just a fact. We can call it headhunting, or we can use coach speak and say we're going to be physical with this guy and wear him out. I don't know which way we want to put it. But yes, obviously that's what happened. That used to be what happened to Frank Gore. I mean, we all know the infamous bounty gate with the Saints and the audio that was released of Greg Williams and the things he was talking about pounding on Frank Gore's head and everybody getting in on that tackle and everybody pounding on it and beating and trying to cut off the head of the 49ers offense, which was Frank Gore the whole time. And, so that if you're an opposing defensive coordinator, that's going to be your message is going to be, we're going to be more physical with this guy in their run game, because you're going to be putting up these highlights of Christian McCaffrey on the angry runs, of him planting a Kella Witherspoon and him stiff arming guys and him getting a first down when it's 3rd and 1 because he runs through a linebacker. Christian McCaffrey is a much more physical runner than people I realized when he was coming over. And I think he's bought into the identity of this team. And they're going to be showing these images of Juwan Jennings pancaking guys into the ground, of Trent Williams taking men's souls, and George Kittle, doing these things. If you're a defensive coordinator coming in, you're showing your team these things because you're saying this is what the level of intensity we have to match. And sometimes that comes back on you. And so I don't know if it's necessarily headhunting Christian McCaffrey, but it is saying we're making a concerted effort to be more physical with this guy than we've been with anybody this year. And so I think that's some of what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think it was, again, a perfect storm, and just all things came together. You mentioned, them having 2 weeks, then we travel and play a 1 o'clock game on East Coast Standard Time, all that stuff. We have never in the last, 4 years had a bad weather game in my recent memory that goes well. And I think of the Colts and the Bears. And even one of those games was at home, and we still just had nothing to offer.
There's been
And
4 really, really bad weather games that we've had. There was the Redskins in 2019, or
and we won that
Washington.
one.
We did win that one. That was the famous, Jimmy G feels great, baby moment, and
Yeah.
the team was slipping sliding. But that was a grimy win. It was a nine to
Sheesh.
three
Yeah.
win. Then we had Baltimore later that year, and that was a 20-17 loss. And Robbie Gould missed. So everybody's saying, hey, we need to be calling up Robbie Gould. Robbie Gould missed a 50-yarder in that game against the Ravens, and Justin Tucker nailed a 51-yarder to win. Okay, so people want to say call up Robbie Gould. Well, Robbie's missed some too. Robbie missed a 42-yarder last year against the Raiders to win the game, and ended up having to go into overtime.
Yeah.
It happens with kickers. They aren't going to make every single one unless they're Justin Tucker. But then you have the Bears game that obviously was what it was, and then this game, it described the conditions a little bit to us, because
Yeah.
it wasn't easy to see, because sometimes when we saw a kick, it looked like there wasn't any wind, but we could see it did get a little rainy at one point, but then the sun came out. What were the conditions like there in Cleveland?
So I will say, and someone mentioned way earlier in the chat that it was a muddy game, and I will actually disagree in that the field looked amazing, honestly, very well taken care of. And if you can recall watching the game, there are those games that you watch and you're like, oh gosh, you can just tell the field is not up to par because guys are slipping on situations where you don't think they should be. And that was not one of those games. And so it was barbecue weather, Glass City. Um, but it was not bad. And here's what was really weird. Those of you who have either been to the Midwest or are from the Midwest or live in the Midwest as I do, this was a regular day in that it's sunny for 18 seconds and it is outright downpouring in the next 18 seconds. And it truly was like that. And you could see that the crowd was getting into it when it rained. And I don't want to say that I sat right behind the 49ers bench 9 rows away. So I saw the storylines of the game on the sideline. No one was, everyone was still upbeat overall. There was no like, oh, like, let me go run and get my poncho on or anything like that. I don't think it was anything like that. However, you can't tell me it didn't affect Jake Moody, and you certainly can't tell me it didn't affect Brock Purdy because he literally lost the ball that one time. Now, again, we're not worried about it moving forward. However, I just don't believe if it was dry and 70 degrees and sunny that it, you know, that it was going to be an issue. And yeah, Khalil Young, it was just weird how the wind kind of came in sometimes, then the sun came out, then it stopped raining, then it drizzled to a point where no one knew it was drizzling because no one in their right mind is not wearing a hat at the stadium. So like you don't feel it and you look up and you're like, yeah, it's drizzling a little bit. Then it downpours for a little bit. It was just very, very odd. But the field, I will say, did not play a major part into it at all. I do want to mention another really, 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 really cool thing that I didn't even get a chance to tell you about, Johnny, because we were just texting back and forth of that the world was ending yesterday. So we didn't get into anything positive. However, the world has not ended. And so we are here. And I am here to tell you guys a really cool story. So I'm sitting 9 rows away in section 111, and come to find out that is where a lot of the families sit. And so there's this um, pretty lady sitting next to me wearing all black and just not loving life. And she's sitting, when I say right next to me, she's literally the seat next to me. And so at halftime, she's not getting up. She's kind of watching the little dog race they had at halftime, which was adorable. And I just finally say to her, is there anything I can do? Like, you are just miserable. And she looks up at me with a kind smile and says, no, I just don't do cold. And I'm like, you bought a ticket and just came? And she goes, are you ready for this, guys? She goes, well, my fiance is George Odom. And I was just blown away and just so excited to talk to her and just kind of ask her about football and her journey as an NFL wife. And like, all that stuff. And she was so kind. Her name's Amanda. She was so sweet, so fun, so nice, told me all kinds of stories. The most I'll say is that she gave me some good stories on some of the players that she's friends with through their wives, like George Kittle's wife or Dre Greenlaw, or her son is her and George Odom's son is the same age as like multiple players and Dre Greenlaw. And then what was really heartwarming was her concern when not only George Odom hurt his thigh, but when Greenlaw and all these injuries, like she's in a group chat and she's texting the other ladies and like, are they okay? And this, and it was like, it was just a really cool experience. And again, she was the nicest person, and it was so fun to chat with her, and it made the loss go down a little bit easier because I got to meet her. I have her on Instagram. I will do my best, Faithful, to try to figure out what the best way is of having her as a contact to have other people on the show. Obviously, I know that's what people are thinking, and I told her, I showed her the channel. I said that, hey, when she said that my fiance is on the team, and I said, no way, what number is he? And she said number 30. I said George Odom. Like right away, and she was impressed. And then I started teaching her about football. So there was one particular play that I want to tell you guys about, and we'll get back into the flow of the game, just this last story. So it was the play in the second half where Cleveland had the ball around midfield, and they're looking to punt, but it's fourth and less than 5. I don't remember what it was. And
Yeah.
they're like, hut, 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 hut. They even, they're in punt formation, but then the guy swoops in like he's
Yeah.
going
They're
to take the
trying to draw
handoff.
us off sides. Yeah.
Of course, of course. And so I said, hey, so do you know what's going on here? And she goes, no. And I just explained the concept and all that. And it was just so cool. Like, oh, yeah, that makes sense because even if it doesn't work, the punter just has more room now to punt because he's close to midfield. I said, exactly. Like, it was just really cool. Like, oh, yeah, I get it now. And then she asked me questions. Like, it was just the funnest time sitting with a stranger that I've ever had, even besides the fact that she's, going to be marrying a player on the team. Besides that, just how kind she was and how awesome. It was just one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. And talk about coincidences when I say she was literally right next to me.
Man, that's awesome. It's easy from the vantage point here of looking back on a rough loss and thinking about all the negatives and harping on the negatives and kind of keeping our focus there. But one, it's a football game. I take losses about as hard as anybody.
Oh,
What is a little frustrating to
we were
me?
texting.
Yeah, we were texting. I had to go somewhere like literally for a work thing, like 10 minutes after I finished with that game. I was about an hour behind on that game. And so I was having to go there and I was all fired up. Um, but in the end, it's a football game. It's one game at this point. Everything will be good moving forward. And it's not the end of the world. What frustrates me right now is seeing there's some people that it feels like they've been waiting for this moment so that they could turn negative and be negative. It was like they're really quiet when everything's all positive and great, even though they say, no, we're just a fan of the team. We're just a fan of the team. That's what they said when they were negative on the team for the last 3-4 years, that, they just want more from the team and want the team to be better. And then they're almost completely silent when the team is looking like the best team in the NFL and the best team, 49ers team for 30 years. And then we have one rough loss and it's all of a sudden now they're flooding everything. And it's like, well, yeah, blah, 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 all this stuff about negative and who's more to blame on this, who's more to blame on that. Are you concerned about this guy going forward? Are we concerned about this? This is why you don't do this with a kicker. That's why, it's just like, oh, suddenly you have all these opinions. Well, you didn't have any opinions about how great the team was for the last 5 weeks. Now, all of a sudden you're putting the team on blast for losing. We got to remember the Browns are coming off a bye week. They were rested up. They were doing really, Jim Schwartz had 2 weeks to prepare for this offense. 2 weeks, okay? And so, yeah, it's just, and like Glassy, thank you for the super chat. It says the Sharks are circling. Yeah, and I think next Monday night we're gonna put all those Sharks to bed. We're gonna shove uh, an air canister in their mouth and shoot it with a rifle. If you know my
Yes.
reference. But no, we'll take that down. I think this team's going to bounce back and bounce back hard. We don't know exactly. At least I haven't seen from. I checked it literally a couple minutes before we started the show if there was any update on CMC and Debo, and there's not really. They're going through tests today. We should hear a little bit more from Kyle Shanahan this afternoon, maybe, depending on what those tests have come back and said as far as how long they're going to be out. But like I said, not everything was terrible. Thank you guys if you're jumping in the show late. Just to let you know, I am not in my normal office. I am at home. My wife had an appointment in another town that she's had for a couple months. We're not pregnant. We're not pregnant. Sometimes when you start saying things like people are like, "Oh, an appointment?" No, 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 no. Nothing bad. She just got an appointment at a consignment store, and so we. She took my youngest, my son, with her this morning. My other school is at my other school. My other daughter is at school, and then my 3-year-old's on the other side of this wall watching Spidey and Friends. She's at home with me because of her daycare. Every teacher tested positive for COVID, so I am in my wife's office at my house right now. That's why I sound different. That's why I look different on this one. But in the end, most things, it's still a day where we were able to watch the 49ers be in a chance to win at the end of the game and get your blood pumping, get that adrenaline going. It was a good time. And there were some good things yesterday. One of the great things in my family's life yesterday was we had a great lunch together. I made one of the roasts I got from White Oak Pastures. If you don't know, we are sponsored. We're an affiliate with a website called White Oak Pastures, and you can go to whiteoakpastures.com/JD49 and you can get $20 off your first order of $150 or more. They are a grass-fed, grass-finished beef and lamb farm. They do pasture-raised, forage-fed pork. They do pasture-raised poultry, and that means it's not just chickens. That's turkeys. That's ducks. They do guineas. I've never even had a guinea, but maybe that's your thing. They do all sorts of cuts of all these things, of all these animals, and you can get other specialty products if you're a hunter. We have hunting season right around the corner, where that's huge here in Alabama. I mean, Alabama, we have a deer overpopulation problem, and so in Alabama, I don't buy a hunting tag, I buy a hunting license. It's like $22, and I have a limit. I think this year they're setting the limit at 10 does a year for the season. Like I don't get one tag. I get the 10 does for the year, and I think it's $3 is what they have because there's so many deer here in Alabama. Well, if you've ever processed deer, one thing that's hard when you do ground deer, it's so lean that sometimes you got to mix some pork fat in there. You got to mix some beef fat in there. Well, if you're a hunter and you're looking at how am I going to get some high quality, nutritious fat that's going to be able to be mixed in with some of the game I've got this year, you can go to White Oak Pastures. They have 2.5-pound bulk packs of beef tallow and pork leaf fat, and those are things that these are healthy, nutritious sources of these things, high in vitamin D, high in vitamin E, high in a great fatty acid profile that you can add to your venison, keep it healthy, and add that flavor in. But we had a chuck roast yesterday from White Oak Pastures, and that was the best roast I have ever had in my life. And I'm not even exaggerating on them. I'm not saying that because they're an affiliate. That was literally the best roast I've ever had in my life. I seared it in my cast iron skillet with just some coarse salt and black pepper. Put it in the slow cooker, braised it in some beef broth with some garlic and thyme, and it came out. The flavor was intense. It was, and not in a bad way. I mean, it was so good. My kids, my 3-year-old, she's on the other side of the wall here. They normally don't eat our roast. They don't normally eat the roast. It's not their thing. They ate every last bite that I gave them. They were so into it. My wife, she loved it. We did not have a bit of that roast left. The only thing that was left was the fat and grizzle that was on it, and that went to the dog. And he was living his best life at that moment. But you can get yours at whiteoakpastures.com/JD49. They send it to you. It's it's butchered and packed there at the facility. It's frozen there. They send it to you in a cooler, packed in dry ice. And I will tell you, you will not be disappointed. I've had their brisket, I've had their ground beef, I've had their ground bull, I've had their chuck roast, and I would not push something for you if I didn't fully believe in it myself. That's just, I don't believe in it. I don't believe in just, okay, this company's paying me to try and sell you on something, because I wouldn't want somebody doing that with me. I will try everything that we tell you about as a product, and if it's not good, we ain't going to do it. So check it out, whiteoakpastures.com. So it wasn't all a bad day yesterday, Adam. And I think going forward, the team is going to learn a lot from this, and they were tested against a great defense and a great defensive coordinator. I mean, the one positive thing is I told Quincy, I think the Browns are going to win the North this year. I think they're going to win the AFC North, and it almost starts feeling like that you're going to have some sort of big clash in the playoffs between the Jets and the Browns. And I will tell you, that will be an absolute blast. If you love defensive football, that will be one of the greatest defensive games, I think, to watch, maybe for the last 30 years.
Or 5-6. I'm calling it. The score will be 5-6. Throw a safety in there for fun.
Yeah. As far as what other losses do I see on our schedule based upon where our team is at? Honestly, I'm going to stick to where I think it is. I think the only other viable losses I see, maybe, God, I hope not, because I'm going to be in that area, is Thanksgiving in Seattle, just because you're talking about a short week in Seattle. That's always a tough place to play. And that and the Seahawks have the ability to play you really tough. That's a potential loss. I really hope not. I'm going to be at the 49ers Rush pregame party on Wednesday night there in Seattle. We're going out to visit some family. So if you're going to be there, you can come hang out with John Chapman at his 49er Rush pregame party Monday or Wednesday night, and I'll be there, and my wife's going to be there. We'll have a good time. But that's one, maybe the Eagles game, but I don't know. I mean, the Eagles do not look like these same Eagles. We've said this for a little while, and the Jets, they stuck it to them just like the Browns stuck it to us. And so, I think that's going to be a bout, but I think, as we're the team now, again, there's so much that can happen between then and now, that if the team was 100% healthy, I don't see another loss on their schedule. But as we saw with the game yesterday, no Dre Greenlaw. Trent Williams was hemmed up. No Christian McCaffrey. No Deebo Samuel. Those things. Elijah Mitchell obviously was not 100% working his way back. They were kind of splitting time with him and Jordan Mason there, and it didn't feel like they were real confident with either one in that game at that point. So, it comes down to health at what point. I think injuries, as we've said even before the season, are going to play a big role in what our final win-loss record is.
Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule here. I will tell you that after the bye, I like our chances, since we talked about having that extra week, that we play at Jacksonville, but I don't think that's going to be 30-10 the way I've been predicting most games. And the Jaguars are not the laughable, your older cousins Jaguars. And so them, and then I don't have that much faith in the Buccaneers, but something tells me like that it may not be a blowout either, and that leads up to then that game that you said on Thanksgiving at Seattle, and then we go into a hard stretch at Eagles versus the Seahawks again, the Ravens on Christmas, an easy one probably with the Cardinals. I know Kyler Murray will be back. We finish with the Rams, and with the Rams, you can't just assume we're going to go 50-0 against them in the next few games. And there's little Dell. Hi, sweetie.
You want to say hi to everybody? There's everybody out here. This is
Say
my
hi.
daughter. This is Gemma. She's a little confused about what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So Adam, I will let
she
you
probably
kind of
can't hear.
No,
Yeah,
she
she
can't. She's grabbing a bunch of stuff off my wife's desk right now. So Adam, I will let you kind of take us
Sure.
out of here as we go. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. I'm glad she could join us for the last little bit. Hi, little Dell. The chat's going crazy. Love it. So again, speaking of the chat, guys, remember to share your phone when with someone that's wearing Niners gear. Take your phone up to them, pull up the channel, and say, "Hey, have you guys seen this? And have you guys heard of these guys?" And share the channel. That's the number one way. Like and share this with in Niner groups, in Niner Facebook groups, wherever you're at. That really helps us. The more eyes on it, I feel confident that people will love the channel once they see it. And so we have to get eyes on it. The way we do that as well is what you've been doing all morning long is boosting the algorithm with the hashtag JD49s and all of the questions, the super chats. Thank you so much for those. That helps us keep the show going as there are costs and fees. And we just really want to keep this going for you guys. So thank you so much. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple, wherever you get your audio podcast, and you prefer to watch with us, then make sure that you follow on YouTube, hit the notification bell so that you can be notified when we go live. So stay tuned as we get into the whys and hows of the game. Johnny will have his breakdown of the film, and we can see what happened and what didn't happen on the loss to the Cleveland Browns. We will be back later this week to discuss the Vikings. Remember, they do not have Justin Jefferson. We can't take any team lightly, but that is positive news for us. So, for Johnny Dell, I am Adam Marino. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe, and as always, go Niners.